Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Ngayon pong gabi, we have our distinguished and foremost legal mind tungkol sa issue ng South China Sea, si Justice Antonio Carpio. And we would like to welcome him to ISAK and also welcome all of you. As Jail and Marie have already said, this is our first year na anniversary. It was very interesting in a matter of months. We had 4,000 loyal following, no? And sometimes viewers that spike up to 11,000. So we are actually surprised at the reception that we've had from you as our audience. So tonight we would like to welcome you to think carefully with Justice Carpio. Itong napakahalagang issue ng West Philippine Sea. And bibigyan po niya ng paliwanag ang maraming mga misleading remarks that have been said ng ating Pangulo at i-focus po natin yung discussion on anong pwede nating laban, no? Bukod sa sinasabing threat ng digmaan. Si Justice Carpio, I think, has the best answers to those questions. So, welcome po kay Justice Carpio. And Marie, would you like to introduce him and Jail, no? Formally.
Sige, let's do this. Mga kapatid, ang ating bisita sa gabing ito ay walang iba kundi si Honorable Antonio Carpio. Kilalang-kilala natin si Justice Carpio. Pinanganak siya noong 1949 at kamakailan lamang ay nag-retire. Former Associate Justice and for 4 instances served as Acting Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Philippines. He was sworn in as a member of the High Court by President Gloria Arroyo back in 2001, October 26, 2001, until he retired in 2019, October 26 as well. We know him he very well for his critical, vocal, and also very courageous stance now when it comes to the West Philippine Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, Justice Carpio is going to speak in the next 15 minutes, and then after that, bibigyan natin ang ating mga sarili ng puwang para tanungin siya. So please feel free to just put in your questions there in our comment section. Justice Carpio, magandang gabi po sa inyo.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to discuss with you the West Philippine Sea issue. I suppose you have watch my video lecture on YouTube. If not, I'll give you a brief wrap up. If you can share the screen with me. Is there a share screen already? Okay. This is the famous 1734 Murillo-Velarde map. Of course, you can see the Scarborough Shoal. It's called Panacot in this map. And the Los Baos de Paragua, those are the Spratlys. And this is an official map of the Philippines during the Spanish regime. And very important because this is actually the only official map showing Philippine territory during the Spanish regime. But Father Pedro Murillo Velarde did not just dream up Panacot and Los Baos de Paragua in this map, because the Spratlys appeared as part of the Philippines way back in 1657 in this map of Nicolas Sanson, who was the royal cartographer of France at the time under King Louis XIII. And he included, of course, the Spratlys as part of Palawan. And this is important because the French annexed the Spratlys as part of the French Union. If you are an overseas territory of the French Union, the inhabitants in the overseas territory are French citizens. They can vote in French elections, all French elections. They are not colonies. And France annexed the Spratlys as part of the French Union. That's why Vietnam cannot say that Vietnam succeeded France, inherited the Spratlys from France, because France never annexed the Spratlys on behalf of ANAM, on behalf of Vietnam. France annexed the Spratlys on behalf of itself, not on behalf of Vietnam. So that's the defect in the claim of Vietnam. And in 1688, Father Coronelli made a map of the Philippines, and he included the Spratlys as part of the Philippines. He drew lines around the Philippines, and you can see clearly that the Spratlys are part of the Philippines. Father Coronelli was a Franciscan. He later became the Father General of the Franciscan Order. During that time, the religious orders in the Philippines would send reports to the Vatican stating what are the new towns established, what are the new islands occupied, the names. And so Father Coronelli was there receiving all of these reports, and he made a map of the Philippines. So matagal na, 1688 pa, even earlier, the Spratlys were already part of the Philippines. And everybody knew that. And as to Scarborough Shoal, in 1792, Alessandro Malaspina came to Manila, and he was the head of the Spanish expedition that went around the world to visit the Spanish possessions all over the world, collecting specimens of flora and fauna, and to chart the Spanish waters over in its overseas territory. The Spaniards at the time were competing with the British. The British sent Captain Cook to go around the world to collect specimens of flora and fauna. So it was at the time like sending a man to the moon. Two great powers competing to explore the world, like the US and USSR sending a man to the moon. So Malaspina was here in Manila, May 1792, and he went to Scarborough Shoal to conduct the first hydrographic survey of Scarborough Shoal. Hydrographic survey means he measured the depths of the areas around Scarborough Shoal, because at that time Scarborough Shoal was very famous already. In 1748, the British thick clipper ship Scarborough ran aground in Scarborough Shoal, and the European cartographers renamed the shoal Scarborough Shoal, from Panacot to Scarborough Shoal. And of course, I got this map from the Museo Naval de Madrid. I asked the Philippine Embassy to get a copy. And when the Americans came here after signing the Treaty of Paris, they published the first map of the Philippines under the American colonial regime. And this is it. And it shows Bajo de Masinloc as part of the Philippines. This is United States Coast and Geodetic Survey published in Washington, D.C. So an official map of the Philippines in 1899, showing Scarborough as part of Philippine territory. At that time, in 1938, the Philippines was governed by the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth government was manned by Filipinos. And this is 1938. The Filipinos running the government at the time were worried that another country might claim Scarborough Shoal. So they asked the Secretary of State of the U.S. if Scarborough Shoal belonged to the Philippines. And the Secretary wrote a memo, yes. Nobody claimed it, and the shoal should be considered as part of the island ceded to the U.S. in the Treaty of Washington of November 7, 1900, which is the topic of my column today in Inquirer. And the reason for this is that the Filipino leaders in the Commonwealth government wanted to put up a lighthouse in Scarborough Shoal so that we will be staking our ownership. 1938, they had a very good foresight, unlike the present government doesn't even want to visit it. So now when the Chinese lost the arbitration in 2016, they dreamed of other stories, false claims, to mislead the world. They said that the Cairo Declaration awarded the Spratlys and the Paracels to China. The Cairo Declaration was a meeting among the three powers, the US, represented by President Roosevelt, UK by Winston Churchill, and China by Chiang Kai-shek. China today saying that that Cairo Declaration awarded the parasols and the spratleys to China. False, and I will prove that it's false. Potsdam Declaration of 1945, China is saying that that declaration awarded the parasols and spratleys to China. False again. The San Francisco Peace Conference of 1951, which ended the Pacific War, China is saying the Peace Conference awarded the parasols and spratleys to China. False, totally false. Let's go to the Cairo Conference. The Cairo Conference stated, the declaration stated, all territories Japan stole from the Chinese, including Manchuria and Formosa, shall be restored to the Republic of China. No mention of the parasols and the spratleys. The parasols and the spratleys would fall under item 3. Japan will also be expelled from all other territories which she seized, which he has taken by violence and greed. There is no mention of the parasols of the spratleys, and there is no mention to whom these territories will be given. The parasols and spratleys would fall under item 3. So there was no award. We go to the Potsdam Declaration. The Potsdam Declaration just reiterated the Cairo Declaration. There is no mention that the parasols and spratleys were awarded to China. So totally false. And the Peace Conference. Now, the China was not even represented in the San Francisco Peace Conference because the Civil War just ended. And the People's Republic of China under the Communist Party, in fact, declared the treaty illegal. Now, in the conference itself, the USSR, the ally of China, the Communist China, filed a motion to award the parasols and the spratleys to China. That motion was defeated by a vote of 46-3 with 1 abstention. So, in fact, the San Francisco Peace Conference rejected to award the parasols and the spratleys to China. It's the opposite. So, we go to the dispositive portion of the July 12, 2016 award. It says, China's claim to historic rights under the 9-dash line are contrary to the convention without lawful effect. The convention superseded historic rights. Others serve no rights. So China's claim to the South China Sea under its 9-dash line was rejected as contrary to UNCLOS and without lawful effect. Now, there was a failed attempt at a solution last November 2018. The Philippines and China signed a memorandum of understanding to cooperate on exploiting oil and gas in the West Philippine Sea. The terms of reference to implement it was signed August 2019, but everything stopped there. China did not continue with the last document, a commercial agreement between Sinuk, the state-owned company of China, and Forum Energy, which is the awardee of the service contract over the reed bank by the Philippine government. Forum Energy holds a service contract issued by the Philippine government over reed bank. There was supposed to be a final agreement, but China suddenly refused to act. And what happened was that China passed a new law last February 2021 that it will fire used cannons, weapons on any foreign vessel that is fishing or surveying or taking any oil and gas and other minerals within the 9-dash line. So China, instead of making peace with other coastal states, passed this law. And this is, of course, against the UN Charter because no country can use force or armed might to settle a dispute because that has been outlawed. You can only settle territorial or maritime dispute by negotiation, by mediation or arbitration, peacefully. Because under the UN Charter, the use of force or the use of threat of force has been outlawed. So this is the problem now of ASEAN coastal states in the world. China suddenly says we will use our might and deadly force to enforce our claim to the 9-dash line. So China has this free warfare strategy, and this will answer some of the questions. China knows that if there is a skirmish in the South China Sea with the Philippines will invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. The skirmish will escalate into a war, into a nuclear war, and if there is a nuclear war, the Chinese civilization will end. The entire Chinese mainland will be totally devastated. Of course, the U.S. will also be, parts of the U.S. will be devastated. So nobody wins in a nuclear war. And so China said, we will secure the South China Sea without going to war, without firing a single shot by this doctrine, the three warfares doctrine of China in the South China Sea. The first warfare is a public opinion warfare. China will assert a historical narrative that it owned the South China Sea since 2,000 years ago. And China actually asserted that, but we debunked that in the arbitral proceedings of The Hague. The tribunal said China never had historic rights. There's no evidence at all, so we have debunked that public warfare of China, public opinion warfare, is dead in the water. The second legal warfare of China is to assert a legal basis that since it owned the South China Sea since 2,000 years ago, it is excluded from UNCLOS because UNCLOS started only in 1982. Their ownership predated UNCLOS, so they're not governed by UNCLOS. But the tribunal said when China ratified UNCLOS, it agreed that all its historic rights are extinguished and it can only claim on the basis of UNCLOS 12 nautical miles as territorial sea, 200 nautical miles as exclusive economic zone, and beyond that, 125 nautical miles as its extended continental shelf. Beyond that, China cannot claim anything because that's precisely the purpose of UNCLOS, to provide peace and stability in the oceans and seas of our planet. So you cannot claim beyond what is allowed under UNCLOS. Otherwise, there would always be a war over waters, over fish, over mineral resources in the sea. So all the historic rights have been extinguished. You can only claim based on the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. So we were able to debunk that legal warfare theory of China that's dead in the water. The third warfare of China is psychological. China will display its warships. China has the largest naval fleet in the world today. It manufactures warships at a faster rate than any other country in the world during peacetime throughout history. So China is intimidating its neighbors, intimidating the Philippines. China built these large air and naval bases in the Spratlys. So China is using psychological warfare to intimidate the Philippines, that of course, state, to accept the 9-dash line as the national boundary of China in the South China Sea. This is the third warfare of China, and this is the one that China is deploying now, and President Duterte has fallen for this warfare. President Duterte said, we cannot fight China. We will be obliterated from the map by China. So let us just ask for the mercy of China. Those are the words of the president. Let's ask for the mercy of China. So this is the psychological warfare of China. And the Communist Party approved this three warfare strategy. In 2003, the Central Committee of the Communist Party approved it. The Central Military Commission, which controls the military in China, approved it. So this is doctrinal in China, the three warfares. The three warfares basically says China will win the South China Sea firing a single shot. We will just intimidate all the other countries. And that's exactly what's happening now. I have explained that already. So I end my brief presentation here. I'm ready for your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent presentation, Justice Carpio. Maraming salamat po. Sa mga kapatid natin sa ISIP-ISAK, so those of you who are joining us right now, please put in your questions in the comment section. We'd be very delighted to share them with Justice Carpio in the rest of our time. So, Justice, are you there? There you are. Justice, okay, sige, right from the get-go, isa sa mga statements ni President Duterte is that the Hague ruling, the results, is just a piece of paper. How do you respond to that? And some people might in fact agree with him.
Well, the rulings of international tribunals are not enforceable by a world policeman. There is no world policeman. Because when you ratify UNCLOS, a state will undertake in good faith to comply with the ruling of an arbitral tribunal created under that convention. So China said, when it ratified, we will honor any decision of an arbitral tribunal. But China has gone rogue. Now, there are 5 countries, nuclear armed, that lost in arbitration cases. The US lost to Nicaragua before the ICJ. And the US said, we will not comply. But eventually the US complied because Nicaragua brought the issue to the General Assembly and said, sponsor the resolution, the US must comply. And the countries of the world voted on that resolution. And the US lost in the first year, second year, US lost more votes. And at the last resolution presented by Nicaragua, there was only one country that sided with the US, Israel. The US got only one vote, the vote of Israel. So it was a huge reputational hit on the US. The US suffered a terrible humiliation before the world. So the US finally said, okay, how much are you asking? An X amount? Okay, we will give you that money, but we will not call it damages. We'll call it economic aid. Because if we call it damages, that means we are admitting we committed a wrongdoing. So economic aid, we give that to everyone. So the Nicaragua said, okay, it's the same amount, so we get it. So that was how it was settled. There was compliance, actually. Second case, India, nuclear armed, lost to Bangladesh in the Bay of Bengal arbitration. India said, we will comply. So 2 nuclear armed states lost, they said complied. Netherlands versus UK in the Arctic Sunrise case. Netherlands is not nuclear armed, Russia is. Russia said, we will not comply. The UNCLOS has no jurisdiction. UNCLOS said, Russia, you pay damages, this amount. Russia said, we will not comply. But a few years later, Russia said to Netherlands, why don't we just compromise? We'll pay you 1/2. And Netherlands agreed. Okay. So there was compliance to the satisfaction of the winning party. And UK versus Mauritius. UK nuclear armed lost to Mauritius. UK said, we will comply. Because that was the original case, which says UK violated UNCLOS by detaching the Chagos without consulting Mauritius. So it was easy to comply. You just consult. So the UK said, we will comply. China is the only country in the world that has not complied with the decision of an arbitral tribunal. And because when the decision came out, Duterte said, I will set it aside because I will borrow from China. I will borrow from China. I will get investments from China, 22 billion. That was 5 years ago. Less than 1 year to go in his term, the money has not arrived. The loans have not arrived. Only less than 5% came. So we were taken for a ride. How will nobody, if we do not assert the ruling, our allies will tell us, how do you expect us to help you when you yourself, you are not asserting the ruling? That's exactly what happened in the last 4 to 5 years. But on their own, our allies have been sailing in the South China Sea, freedom of navigation. China said in the West Philippine Sea, there is no EEZ of the Philippines. Those are our waters within the 9-dash line. The US and its allies, every 45 days, they sail in the West Philippine Sea. And they tell the Chinese, this is the EEZ of a coastal state, and we can conduct naval drills here. These are not your waters. So every 45 days, the US and its allies enforce the ruling for us. That's the strongest enforcement of the ruling because they send warships there and they conduct naval drills. China said, you cannot conduct naval drills because those are our waters. But the US and its allies conduct naval drills because they say this is an EEZ, exclusive economic zone of a coastal state. There's only one coastal state in the West Philippine Sea, the Philippines. And in the coastal state under UNCLOS, the EEZ under UNCLOS, there is freedom of navigation and overflight, including the right to conduct naval drills, naval exercises. So that is enforcement. But what is the Duterte administration doing? They don't even welcome the naval, the freedom of navigation exercises of the US. They don't want to join. They're saying, the Duterte administration is saying, we don't take sides in the dispute between China and the US on freedom of navigation in the West Philippine Sea. We should be welcoming because that is the most robust enforcement, most effective enforcement of the ruling. So that's the situation now in the under the Duterte administration. It cannot be. How can we expect enforcement when there is? We don't even enforce it. We said Duterte said on day one, I will set it aside.
Yeah.
So, but
Justice,
the funds didn't come. Huh?
yeah. Justice, exactly on that point. Now, before we read, we have so many questions from our audience now. Just a follow up on that point. No, is our position much weaker now? I know I've read your writing on this, but for the sake of our audience, is our position weaker now because our state or our president has been, making these statements that we put it aside, it's just a piece of paper, and so forth. Is our position weaker now?
The award will always be there,
Okay.
as long as we do not waive the award expressly or impliedly.
Oh, can you explain that point? What does
Okay.
waiving mean? That's a great
The
point.
waiver can be done formally,
Yeah.
or it can be done through what is known in international as unilateral declaration. Under international law, the head of state, the president, can say, I set aside the ruling. Set aside the ruling means I abrogate the ruling, I revoke the ruling, I abandon the ruling. And under international law, if you say that, and the other side, the other party to the dispute says, I accept,
Okay.
then that will bind you. That will bind the Philippines. So when the president came back from Singapore at the start of his administration, and he said, "I am setting aside the ruling." I immediately called up the DFA. I said, "That's a unilateral declaration. If China says we accept, we're bound, we're dead. So you better make an announcement that the president did not intend to abandon the ruling. The president merely meant he will put it aside and raise it at a future date. In other words, he is not abandoning it." Good thing that they listened and they made a statement that the president is not abandoning the ruling. A few hours later, China said, "We welcome the announcement, we accept." Too late for them. We were able to save the ruling. So that is the problem. So all we are doing now is trying to protect the ruling because it could be waived by inadvertence of the president.
Mhm.
And we're trying to save it. So far, we have been successful. And when the president said China is in possession of the West Philippine Sea, I immediately called up the the DFA, said that's a unilateral declaration. And they made funny because they said the president did not mean that we were saying, the Philippines was saying that China's possession. What the president meant that China's position is that they are in possession. Very strange. But the effect was that the DFA was clarifying that that was not the intention of the president, was not admitting that China is in possession. That's why I started this move that we must demand that the president be more categorical, to withdraw his statement already, because this is causing confusion. One day the Chinese will bring this up, I'm sure, that your president has already waived.
Right.
They will bring this up for sure.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Tama. There have been also instances po, Justice Carpio, that the spokesperson has said comments, and I know that one of the staunch defenders ng West Philippine Sea, si Dr. J. Batong Bakal, has also corrected yung mga comments like disowning the Julian Felipe Reef or saying it's not part of our economic zone. Alam ko na si Dr. J. Batong Bakal was also able to address that. So thank you for enlightening us that even these words, these careless comments could cause the ruling to have no effect. May mga comments po kaming, or rather may mga controversial na remarks na sininop ng aming staff na gusto naming tulungan niyo po kami na himay-himayin yung detalye para mas maintindihan namin mga controversial remarks na ginawa ng ating Pangulo. Sabi po niya during his speech at the 122nd anniversary of the Presidential Security Group, sabi niya, the Philippines has no sovereignty over its EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. This remark might have confused our common citizens. What is the difference ho ba, Justice Carpio, ng sovereignty and sovereignty rights?
Can you repeat that, what he said, that the Philippines
has no sovereignty over its EEZ in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, that's correct. I mean, EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone, you don't have sovereignty over that. You have only sovereign rights. Sovereign rights is a part of sovereignty. Your sovereignty is complete. You have total control. You own it. But sovereign rights are certain rights like sovereign right to get the gas, sovereign right to get the fish. Sa EEZ, we have sovereign rights to exploit for ourselves all the natural resources, fish, oil, gas, and other mineral resources. But we don't have sovereignty because there's freedom of navigation. Other countries can sail there, can conduct naval drills because we don't have sovereignty. What we have sovereignty in our territorial sea. They cannot conduct naval drills in our territorial sea. That's the difference. But there's nothing new. Everybody knows that. I mean, for him to say we don't have sovereignty in our EZ. That's nothing new. We always knew that. Everybody knew that. Those who are involved in the law of the sea.
Mhm.
He did not discover something new there.
Okay po. Thank you for clarifying that, Justice Carpio. Maybe one more remark from our President na gusto natin na mahimay nating mabuti. This was during his pre-recorded briefing aired on May 5. Ang sabi niya nga ay just a piece of paper, no? Yan yung diniscuss natin kanina. How do we enforce the ruling when China is adamant, no, to comply? How do we, what do we do in the face of their very adamant na pag-comply sa naging ruling po?
As I said, the strongest enforcement are the freedom of navigation operations and our flight operations of the U.S. We join them. So when we join them, we tell China, "Oy, hindi sa inyo ito. We can conduct naval drills." That's the strongest manifestation. And we have the world behind us. The US, UK, France, Australia, Japan, they are all behind us. That's really the strongest. We can also enter into an agreement with Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia to patrol each other's EEZ. In the West Philippine Sea, in our EEZ, we patrol jointly with Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. And in the EEZ of Vietnam, we'll do the same. We will patrol to tell China, we have an EEZ. The waters are not yours. That is a strong enforcement. But the president doesn't want that because he doesn't want to displease China. Because he said, I love President Xi Jinping. Why? Because President Xi Jinping said, I will not allow your military to oust you, to mutiny against you. We will be your protector. So the president is the vassal, in effect, of President Xi Jinping. So he doesn't want to do anything that will displease President Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
There are many ways of enforcing the ruling. We can also file an extended continental shelf claim. Like we filed one in the Benham Rice. We got it because nobody opposed. In the South China Sea, in the West Philippine Sea, we can still file an extended continental shelf claim. And in that area, opposite facing from the coast of Luzon, there's only one coastal state that can possibly oppose China. But what will be the ground of China in opposing? Because they lost already in the arbitration. So if there's no opposition or if there's no valid opposition, because the UN Commission on the limits of the continental shelf will award it to us because there's already a UNCLOS tribunal ruling that we have an EEZ. And that the nine-dash line of China has no legal effect. If it has no legal effect, China cannot use that argument. There are many ways.
Opo, tama. At
If
hindi
you
lang,
have the political will.
yes, correct. At hindi lang gera ang talagang, but because the narrative would always be, pagka nakanti natin, may puputok na gera. And so, I think what's very clear is that maraming paraan para ating i-enforce yung ating napanalunan. And it's really not...
If we send our patrol boats in the West Philippine Sea, that is a legal right under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, because you must protect your EEZ from poachers. So you have to send your Coast Guard or your Navy. And if you protect your legal right, that is not an act of aggression. It's a lawful act. So you can, the president can say that is aggressive, that is confrontational. That's not confrontational. When you protect your backyard from squatters or from somebody who's stealing your orchard fruits, you're not being aggressive. You're not conducting a lawful act. That is a lawful act. It's just like protecting your backyard. If you own it, you send somebody there to drive away the poachers. That's not illegal. That's your right.
Justice Carpio, we're winding down now. May mga tanong related now to the elections. And we know that you're part of the Sambayan and so forth. May isang tanong si Ate Leonora Gonzalez. Sabi niya, for the 2022 elections, I'm sure many national candidates will mouth the same stand, similar to I will jet ski and plant our flag over there. Diba? Marami pong naniwala doon, and then later on, naliwanag na nung bibiro lang pala. Ang tanong ni Ate Nor, what exactly can we ask the presidential candidates to do to manifest concretely their strong position to defend the WPS, West Philippine Sea? Is there anything that we can demand them to say or do?
They will always promise something,
Okay.
but if you know that they promised to you but broke it and cursed you for being stupid to believe in them, then never trust them again. Never trust whomever they support or ask you to vote for. We know we've been had. At inunsulto pa tayo, gago ka, naniwala ka sa akin. Eh magpapagago ka ba sa 2022? Yun ang tanong. Sinabi, gago ka, naniwala ka sa akin na mag-jet ski ako. Maniniwala ka ba sa kanya? Talagang gago ka kung maniwala ka pa.
I don't even know how to respond to that question.
I mean, you pull me once,
No more. Not twice.
yeah, not twice. Magpapaloko pa ba tayo ulit?
Pero ibig sabihin, parang, okay, during making the advance, should we ask deliberately the candidate na parang, ano ang position mo sa West Philippine Sea?
Yes, we should ask every candidate.
Okay.
Do you agree with President Duterte when he says China is in possession of the West Philippine Sea? Do you agree with President Duterte that the arbitral award is just a piece of paper?
Got
Do
it.
you agree with President Duterte that Chinese fishermen can fish in our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea? Tanungin dapat natin yan.
Sharp. Those are sharp questions. Medyo mahirap lang yan eh. It takes time to digest all those questions, for ordinary Filipinos, even for me. Pero I think those are important questions.
You know why galunggong is expensive now?
That's
Because the Chinese fishing fleet, the largest in the world, they scoop all the galunggong in the West Philippine Sea. And where do we buy galunggong now? From China. They get it for free in the West Philippine Sea. Atin yun. And binibenta sa atin mahal. Niloloko tayo.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
yung ating energy sa Luzon, 40% of our energy comes from Malampaya. Malampaya will run out of gas. And the replacement of Malampaya is supposed to be Reed Bank. And if we don't develop Malampaya, we will have 12 to 14 hours of brownout every day in Luzon. Magsasara mga factory, mga eskwela, mga malls. It will be worse than COVID-19. There will be unemployment. And anong ginagawa ni Duterte? Binabaliwala niya yung Reed Bank.
Oo nga.
When he says China is in possession, what company will go to Reed Bank to get the gas when the president said, hawak na ng China yan eh. So why will you go there? The president is actually telling the service contractors whom we have contracted to go to Reed Bank, huwag kayo pumunta dyan kasi hawak na yan ng China. That is the meaning. When president says China is in possession of the West Philippine Sea, he's telling all those Philippine contractors, huwag kayong mag-aksaya ng oras ninyo at pera ninyo kasi hawak na ng China yan. He's actually driving them away. And what will happen? We will have no gas. We will have 12 to 14 hours of rotating brownout in Luzon. And we have to understand that.
I suppose, Justice Carpio, yun yung mga usapin na malapit sa ordinaryong tao, hindi po ba?
Yes, because it affects your food security, your job security, and the future of our people. Because ano yung eskwela natin? Wala tayong power.
That's
Eh,
right.
may COVID na, pag wala pang electricity, wala ka na talaga. You are in complete darkness.
Oo, apektado pati mga estudyante and so forth.
Yeah. And people do not understand that the message of the president, when he says China is in possession, ang message niya to the Western companies that have service contracts with us.
Yeah.
Natakot niya. Huwag na kayo pumunta dito. Bakit? Ibibigay niya sa China eh.
Now it makes sense. Palagay ko, Justice Carpio, ito yung mga usapin na dapat maintindihan ng mga ordinaryong Pilipino. Kasi every time we talk about maps and so forth and the rule of law and so forth, those are very important.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it affects our stomach because the fish comes from the West Philippine Sea. It affects our jobs because the power comes from the West Philippine Sea. It affects our schooling because the power comes from the West Philippine Sea.
Justice Carpio, last few questions. Natanong ang isang estudyante from University of Philippines, Los Baños, si Keith Manyo. Sabi niya, is there anything that we can do to protect the fisheries sector? Yung mga mangingisda natin doon.
We must demand that the President withdraw his statement allowing the Chinese to fish in the West Philippine Sea. Because China has the largest fishing fleet in the world. Nakita ba ninyo yung mga trawlers nila? Ang atin, mga bangka, wooden boats, paano? How can we compete?
Oo nga eh.
Yeah.
Napakalaki. They have the largest fishing fleet in the world. Wala pa tayong 1/10. And pinayagan niya. So demand. Ask him to retract that statement. And we ask him to retract that every day until election day.
Yes.
We must ask him to retract his statement that the Chinese can fish in the West Philippine Sea, that the China is in possession of the West Philippine Sea, that the arbitral award is a piece of paper. We ask that every day until election day.
Strong and powerful words. Maraming salamat po, Justice Carpio. I think yung in-explain ninyo, I agree with Kuya Jill, lumapit sa sikmura natin, no, yung issue. And therefore, it's really not just a piece of paper for us. Siguro po, we are now winding down. And by the way, sa mga viewers namin sa Facebook, it shows here on my screen na kumonti tayo. Pero I can hear my mother and I can see my friend commenting. So if you're still there, thank you very much. And just keep your comments. And ang gagawin ng staff namin as a gift to our guest is sisinupin ho namin yung mga komento ninyo. Lalo na yung mga high school students, no, nakasama natin ngayon. Maraming salamat sa mga taga San Francisco High School dito sa Quezon City. So, Justice Carpio, we have come to this part of our program na nagwa-wind down na po tayo. Maybe I would just want to ask you, ano po ang mensahe ninyo sa ating mga viewers bukod sa patuloy na magtanong at patuloy na to keep on voicing out yung ating concern sa West Philippine Sea. Ano pa po ang gusto ninyong iwan na mensahe sa ating mga viewers?
You know, China, if it gets the West Philippine Sea, will get it forever. There is no chance for us to recover. We can never recover. So we have to stop China, give our all. We have to exert our utmost effort to stop this invasion of China in the West Philippines. Because once China gets that, we will never get it. Our children, grandchildren will never get it back. This is the only time we can stop it. And we have to stop it now. If not, it will be gone forever. And our children and grandchildren will blame all of us for not stopping China. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Justice Carpio, and in behalf of all of us na nakakaintindi on how brave yung ginawa ninyo to bring this sa Hague, maraming salamat po. At this moment, we want to invite Dr. Melba para sa ating paglalagom and to help us see this with the biblical lens. Ate Melba. Nakamute po kayo.
Melba, unmute yourself.
Narinig na niyo ako?
Now,
Marami pong salamat kay Justice Carpio for some of the
more compelling na mga facts. Ano? Halimbawa, yung sinabi niya kanina, na marami ng mga arbitration cases na napanalo ng mga maliliit na bansa, yung Nicaragua against US, yung mga ganyan. And kahit sinasabi nila, we will not comply, eventually, they had to comply. So, siguro yung issue ng political will. Nagtataka ako kung bakit pamacho-macho yung presidente natin, pero wala siyang political will whatsoever to enforce what is lawfully asked. So, isa yun. Pangalawa, sinabi ni Justice Carpio na actually malapit ito sa ating stomach, no? Sa akin pong sariling research nung ako'y nasa Taiwan, I discovered na yung kalahati, half of the gas and oil reserves na nasa South China Sea, nasa ating exclusive economic zone. Kaya yung China, hindi niya masyadong pinapatos ang Malaysia and even yung Vietnam, no? Ang talagang gusto niyang mahawakan ang Pilipinas kasi kalahati ng oil and gas deposits nandoon sa atin. Yung recto bank, kaya gusto nila yon, nasa ating exclusive economic zone. Kaya binabayaran niya lahat yung mga tao who have anything to do with decision making dito. So dapat talaga, mga kapatid, mga kababayan, talagang pagtulungan natin na labanan ito. Sapagkat sa totoo lang, hahawakan nila tayo sa leeg. And actually, yung sinasabi ni Justice Carpio na sinabi na niya China is in possession, sa totoo lang, nung panahon po ni Ramos, merong mga Nordic companies na interesado na sa joint exploration ng South China Sea. Kaya lang, itong si Duterte ngayon, sinasabi niya, well, hindi na pwede kasi China is in possession. Kasi ang China lang ang pwedeng gumawa ng joint exploration. So, isa yun. And yun na nga, maganda na si Justice Carpio brought to brass tacks sa ating stomach itong issue na to. Kasi sa totoo lang, as we have seen nung nakaraang ISIP-ISAK, 80% halimbawa ng kabuhayan ng mga fishermen doon sa Baho de Masinloc. Naalala ko si Senator Leticia Sahani. Sabi nga sa akin, for generations, those have been common waters. At ngayon, binalik yun ng UNCLOS, ano? Na sabi, itong mga rocks, mga ganito, are actually mga commons. It's an international commons. Pero bumalik tayo ron historically doon sa fact na yung South China Sea was actually not anybody's territory. I was interested, for instance, to learn na yung historically, yung itong si Cheng Ho, yun yung voyager ng Ming Dynasty. In the, ang height ng supremacy, no? Naval supremacy ng China was during the Ming Dynasty, 1500s, ganyan. And sinasabi na even at the height of its supremacy, nakapunta sila all the way sa coast ng Africa. Pero sadly, they were not really interested in claiming anything, because yung South China Sea was territorial waters. Ang interesado lang sila mag-display ng kanilang Ming Dynasty na power. In fact, yung commercial na voyages, second lang yun doon sa kanilang idea of yung i-display yung glories ng Ming Dynasty. So, even then, at the height of their naval na supremacy, hindi nila sinabi na itong China Sea is ours. Dahil commons yun eh. At ngayon, binalik ngayon yan as international commons. That's why yung America, France, they want to maintain yung navigation rights nila over those waters. Kasi nga, international commons. So, yung sinasabi ni Justice Carpio na there are ways of mastering an alliance kung meron lang political will, no? Meron tayong legal rights, meron din tayong pwedeng meta-legal pressures. Yun yung alliances sa Amerika, sa France, sa Australia. And together with our, neighbors, kagaya ng Malaysia, kagaya ng Vietnam. Ang maganda is yung Vietnam napakaliit pero lumalaban siya.
Even if noong 1974, it was punished by China, no? When it was a very weak state. Pero ang Vietnam ngayon is very strong. Kaya malakas ang loob niya. And I think, kung imamaster lang natin ito, may laban talaga. Hindi totoo na yun, yung threat ng digmaan. Well, in the first place, speaking anthropologically, ang China, culturally, does not mount actual na war. Hindi, wala yan sa history nila. Yun lang mga near neighbors nila, kagaya ng Vietnam, kagaya ng India, yan, lalabanan nila, no? Dahil territorial disputes nila yan. Pero yung sabi, magko-conquer sila ng malayo, kagaya natin, hindi nila ginagawa yan. Dahil culturally, ang malaki sa isip nila, yung si Sun Tzu, yung Art of War, na sinasabi, you can break an enemy's resistance without fighting. Kaya as much as possible, hindi sila makikipagdigmaan. Lalo ng Pilipinas, kayang-kaya nilang suhulan ng ating mga gobyerno. Kayang-kaya nila yung mga businessman, mag-joint venture na sa kanila, etc. In other words, yung threat of war, no, hindi totoo yan. It's a false claim. Kasi ang China culturally, does not go to war. Ang gagawin niya, isa-subvert ka niya economically, hahawakan ka niya sa liig economically. At yun ang art of war ni Sun Tzu. If you can go from A to B without fighting, yan ang gusto niya. At sa totoo lang, yan ang ginagawa niya sa atin. He doesn't have to fight. Hindi kailangan magdigmaan dito sa Pilipinas. Alam niya, kaya niya na i-occupy tayo economically. At ginagawa na po yan. Doon ako po'y taga Palawan, yung aking mga kamag-anakan doon, sinasabi na actually nagbibili na sila ng lupa sa El Nido. Dahil ang El Nido malapit sa Pag-asa Island, sa Spratlys. No? I mean, at yan, all of that is being done silently. Siguro ang sinabi na ni Justice sa atin, na napaka panganib, malaking panganib sa atin at hindi natin alam na nangyayari na ito sa atin. Hindi lang yung mga pogo, hindi lang yung mga, alam ba nyo na 3 million na ang mga mainland Chinese dito? Yung ating mga taal na mga Filipino-Chinese, 1 million, ganyan. Sila, 3 million na. So, dapat maintindihan natin na slowly we are actually being invaded. It's a silent invasion. At ang ginagawa is kinokolonize yung mga powerful institutions natin mula sa presidency hanggang dito sa mga ano. So, kailangan siguro magising tayong lahat. Yung dangers that have been pointed out by Justice Carpio, no? Napakaseryoso nun. You are talking future generations and you're talking of present na mga fishermen na nagkakagutom doon sa Baho de Masinloc. I mean, 80% wala nang hanap buhay. They cannot even send their children to school. Tapos, sabi nga ng Justice, hindi, pati yung pag-aaral, wala tayong oil, wala tayong gas, no? So, talang, we own half of the gas and oil reserves in our exclusive economic zone. Yun nga lang, syempre, dahil alam ng China yun, talagang hahawagan tayo sa liit. So, siguro mga kapatid, ito po ay isang malaking issue na kailangan natin ipagdasal. At kailangan din po natin, on a very practical way, na anything mainland China, sana wag na tayong bibili ng mga goods nila, kahit na mas mura. And anyway, yung mga goods naman nila, sa totoo lang, ay mabilis mag-self-destruct. So, as a matter of, let us protect yung whatever we can protect, no, on our own. Huwag nang bumili ng kahit na ng Chinese goods. At saka maging alert doon sa mga encroachments nila. Whether sa ating mga companies, I know of yung one of our staff, halimbawa na dati, umalis daw sa Globe. Bakit? Kasi daw, ando doon na yung China. And gumagawa sila ng mga procedures, mga staff, na gusto nila yun ang orientation ng mga staff, hindi yung Filipino na way of management system. So, very very subversive yung pasok sa atin. At dapat matakot tayo enough. Hindi ito problema lang ng gobyerno, problema ng buong mamamayan na labanan ito. Yun lamang po siguro, and we want to thank si Justice Carpio for giving us a very serious warning, no, sa panganib ng China sa South China Sea.
Maraming salamat po, Ate Melba. Of course, Kuya Jay, maraming salamat kay Justice Carpio. Kuya Jay, would you like to say anything to
Yeah,
our...
I wanted to say thanks to Justice Carpio. Justice Carpio, alam namin na ilang beses nyo na-share ito and hindi kayo natapagod. We pray that the Lord will continue to strengthen you and, will keep that fire burning.
Yes.
Marami po kami na nanalangin for you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you everyone.